Welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm Aaron Freeman, joined by my good friend Scott Karasik. We have a new face, Arif Hasan from Vikings Territory, is joining us to talk a little bit about the upcoming matchup between the Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings in Week 4. But before we jump into that, we're going to talk about the Falcons-Bucks game from last week. And then at the end of the show, as usual, we'll get into your mailbag questions. So, Arif, we want to welcome you to the show. It's the first time we've had a guest in a couple of shows, right, Scott?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of months.
But... Okay, yeah. All right, well, a couple months, yeah. So it's nice to have somebody other than Scott to talk to and look at during these shows. So thanks for...
I'm honored that I'm that guest. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we appreciate you. All right, Arif, we know that you're not an expert on the Falcons. You know, your area of expertise is the Vikings. But did you happen to catch last week's Thursday night game between the Falcons and the Bucks?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, a little bit to my regret. I mean, the game got kind of boring kind of quickly, but that's good for y'all. No, I mean, I really enjoyed taking a look at that game. I mean, Falcons were one of the teams that I think were undervalued in the betting market, and so I might have tried to take advantage of that, and so I was happy to see that bear out for me. But just in general, I mean, you could see what it meant to have a healthy and totally in sync, Falcons offense, which I mean, not completely healthy, but I mean, it was stunning, to see sort of everything come together. It was kind of intimidating.
Okay.
I mean, also Steven Jackson. I didn't anticipate that. That was good job, Steven Jackson.
He had holes to run through and just basically took what the line gave him most of the night.
Yeah, no, it's true, and sort of that's what his strength has been for sort of the second half of his career. He takes what the line gives him, but I mean, in this game, it seemed like he was able to get, a couple of extra. I mean, he broke like something like 4 or 5 tackles as he was running. He got a little bit more done than I normally anticipated. I remember I was tweeting during the game that it was kind of surprising that an 80-year-old running back could still do this much.
That's true. 80-year-old running backs aren't very good like that.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see the Falcons kind of do all that and then not have Roddy White in the game. And so it makes you kind of curious to see what they can do when they do have a healthy Roddy White and a full complement of receivers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what that looks like in general. Obviously, I'm not quite looking forward to that immediately, but it's just I remember the Falcons last year. I remember the Falcons the year before. Obviously starkly different teams, and in part because of injuries to the receiving core, and so it's nice to see that receiving core come back. I remember there was even MVP talk about Roddy White a couple of years ago at the beginning of the season. I mean, he's probably an underrated receiver nationally. Just in terms of what he can get done, and then Julio Jones has probably surpassed him right now in terms of total talent. I don't really know, and it's for me it's not that important of a debate because both of them are good enough that it's difficult to pay attention to. In the NFC North, there's a bunch of really good sets of receiving cores, and so obviously they've had to the response has been to try and get tall cornerbacks, physical cornerbacks that have the ability to track well. And so in that sense, the Vikings are built sort of in a way to deal with the Falcons, but I don't necessarily mean that means they're ready, right, in the same way. You saw in the Buccaneers game that the Falcons were definitely well engineered to attack not just a variety of looks and in a variety of ways, and downfield and things like that, but that they ran extraordinarily effective route combinations that didn't just take sort of advantage of the personnel that they had, but took advantage of what Matt Ryan's really really good at, which is timing oriented passes after reading the defense. It was fantastic to watch. Everything was snapping.
So I've been looking at the Vikings and thinking, you know what, Atlanta had an awful pass-blocking offensive line last year, but they've kind of turned it around this year. Who would you say would give Atlanta the most trouble on that entire line? Because a couple of names stand out for me that I liked in college, like Sharif Floyd or Linval Joseph, but I'm not seeing that primary pass rusher that they've had for years, like Jared Allen.
Yeah, the hope was that Everson Griffin would stand up, and aside from some cleanup work that he did against the St. Louis Rams, that I wouldn't necessarily count as part of his resume at this point. I don't think any of the edge rushers are particularly dangerous. I mean, Brian Robinson has basically, made a career of getting pressures on the quarterback and not coming home, and those are pretty valuable, honestly. But it can get frustrating to see someone rack up so many pressures. I think he has something like probably 7 or 8 quarterback hurries, probably 2 or 3 quarterback hits, something like that. And that's just sort of, we know that that's what Brian Robinson is. I mean, for all his athleticism, he can't seem to close. Whatever. I mean, that's pretty disruptive in terms of trying to figure out, who best to stop. But I don't think there's a primary pass rusher, but I think the person you want to watch out for the most is Linval Joseph. He didn't have a particularly stellar game last week, if I remember correctly. But I mean, he was probably the best player on the defense against the Rams, and in general, I mean, he's an extremely talented player. I mean, one of those guys that shouldn't move as quickly as he does for his size. He's got a surprisingly sophisticated game in terms of what he does with his hands, and he anchors well. And obviously the Falcons right now aren't built to run first, but that's always super important for the way the Vikings construct their defense, because it's always about forcing third and long. So in terms of who on the defensive line you'd want to watch out for, I'd say Linval Joseph. Whether or not that means you'd want to watch out for him as a pass rusher, I think that's a little bit different. At best, he'll probably enable a lot of blitzes from the linebackers, which is probably and defensive backs, which is probably the best way for the Vikings to be able to at least get home against Matt Ryan, even against an offensive line that was not particularly stellar last year, and this year it's not like it's the best offensive line in the league, but it's doing pretty well. I think you'd probably want to watch out for Joseph being able to complicate the blocking schemes by taking on 2 blockers, being difficult to block, one-on-one. I think Lamar Holmes is still probably a weakness, so I'd still watch out for Brian Robinson. But at the end of the day, the one person to watch out for is Linval Joseph.
Well, Holmes has gotten a lot better in one aspect. He's still an awful run blocker. I'm not going to say that he's a good run blocker, but he's proven to be a decent pass blocker. Unless he goes up against, arguably the best pass rusher in the AFC North in Carlos Dunlap.
Fair enough. I only caught a little bit of that Cincinnati game, which it was interesting to watch, if only because it provided a little bit of a counterpoint, I guess, to the Buccaneers game, right? Because this Falcons team, obviously has a lot of pieces, going for it. But at times, I guess it's not completely who it was. The thing that surprised me most about that Bengals game, I think, was actually Joe Hawley. I don't think he did particularly well in that game, if I remember. Did I catch that right or no?
Yeah, I would say Hawley wasn't at his best in that Bengals game.
Yeah. And the Bengals defensive line, people like to think about Mike Zimmer constructing a defense similar to the way the Bengals constructed their defense last year. There's obviously a lot of similarities. I mean, it's they're both over fronts and they both want to feature a 3 technique. Obviously, the 3 technique that the Bengals have is a little bit better than the one the Vikings have been employing. I mean, Sharif Floyd's probably not even the best 3 technique on the roster, which is a little bit depressing. But in terms of attacking, that offensive line, obviously the Vikings would prefer to see the offensive line that was out in that Bengals game than the one that was up against that Bucs team. Which, I mean, that Bucs team has a pretty good pass rush.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strength.
When you don't have a number 6 overall pick and Jake Matthews out there against the Bengals, it makes it a little tougher for your blocking schemes because you're not giving Lamar Holmes that help on that right side. Because let's be honest, he does need a little bit of help on speed with speed rushers.
Yeah. Yeah. So wait, those Kareem in the game, right? So you chip on that side or you'd slide to that side.
Yeah, you slide to the weak sides because you knew that Matt Ryan could see on his right side.
Yeah. So that's fair too. Yeah. I don't know. The Bengals game probably doesn't provide as much of a blueprint for the Vikings as people might like to think. Just because that team is just more complete and finished in terms of its construction. Yeah, if Joe Hawley, is up to, I think, his usual standard, which, I mean, you probably know better than I do, but to me he seems like a better than average center, not elite or anything like that, but a better than average center. Then I think that's sort of the focal point of where the Vikings were going to generate any disruption, and so that would be difficult for the Vikings overall in terms of the way they send free rushers and things like that. So the hope is that the Vikings can complicate things on the interior and that sort of lets everything else work out with edge rushers and with blitzers and things like that. And the way I think Hawley played in that Cincinnati game, complicated of course by the fact that sometimes they would loop Geno Atkins in and stuff like that. It would be probably better for the way the Vikings want to set up their defense overall.
Though to be fair, Sharif Floyd isn't anywhere close to what Geno Atkins is.
No, not particularly close. He's been extremely disappointing actually. But I mean, the only thing that the Vikings can sort of hang their hat on is that he had a pretty decent preseason, I guess. He's had a couple of splash plays. I don't know. It's easy for me to just discredit anything that happened in the Rams game, which is probably an overreaction to what's happened in the past 2 weeks. But he flashed against the Rams, which is something. But no, I mean he's not been particularly good. This Tom Johnson cat that used to play for the Saints, he's been really good for a rotational defensive lineman. As a 3 technique, he's been putting consistent pressure. He's been good in the run and as a pass rusher. I think he has at least 2 sacks, which I mean for a rotational 3 tech, I think that's pretty good. He's probably the best 3 tech on the roster, which is disappointing.
He for the Saints he played left end, so when they slide him over. He played a 5 technique last year. Didn't really look very good at it. So when they slide him over to the nose or to the 3 tech, he does kind of look like Babineau did a couple years back, even though Aaron may not want to admit it.
No one looks like Babineau.
If you haven't figured out, Babineau is his favorite player.
Well, he looked good in that Bucs game, didn't he?
Ever. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Defensive tackle-wise, he's up there with Rod Coleman. I don't know. But yeah, Babineau's been the most consistent defensive lineman, I think, for the first 3 games of the Falcons. He's been consistently getting pressure, beating guys. And, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Arif, is I noticed that Brandon Fusco got hurt last week. Do you know any updates on his status? Because if Vlad Dukas is replacing him at right guard, I do think that's a matchup that the Falcons can definitely exploit, since the majority of their capable pass rushers are the interior guys, Babineau, Peters, and Goodman.
Yeah, I would say that that's even sugarcoating a little bit. I think if Vlad Dukas is out there, he's a massive liability. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, so 2 things. First, to answer that first question, so Brandon Fusco is getting a second opinion, which is, to me, not a good sign.
Yeah.
And it's a pectoral injury, and typically those last a couple of weeks. So I highly doubt that he suits up for this game. In that case, I mean, Vlad Dukas was the one who was put in this game, much to my surprise, actually. I thought it would be Joe Berger, but I guess Berger's old, and maybe they think of him as a center only at this point in his career. Either way, if it's Dukas, that's a big problem. I mean, he looked better in the Vikings preseason than he ever did for the Jets, but that's not a particularly high bar to clear.
if you gotta start Vlad Dukas at left guard, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, no, I mean, the first play in, he drew a holding penalty, and then 4 plays later, he drew another penalty. I mean, and it was, part of it is, he's not synced with the offensive line like everyone else, so you don't want to just blame his talent level. But, I mean, also you can blame his talent level. He was getting bodied.
Well, could you see David Yankee get the start here?
I don't think so. In fact, I'm trying to remember which offensive lineman wasn't active in that game. And if it
because Yankee hasn't played a snap yet.
Yeah, no, he hasn't. And part of it is that he showed up late to training camp because of the way the quarter system works. I think that the coaches are overemphasizing that to hide that they don't think he's necessarily ready yet. Yeah, he was inactive against this in this last game, so I really doubt he gets the start. Yeah, I think what Darren was pointing out to me, immediately after the draft, that one of the biggest issues that Yankee had was in terms of balance. And after he pointed that out, it's kind of one of the only things I could look for. I mean, he probably has the best awareness out of any of the guards on the roster. He's spectacular in terms of like blitz pickup and providing help and knowing when to peel off blocks, stuff like that. But in terms of just maintaining himself and making sure that he's staying on base, I think he's had some significant issues in the preseason. I think he wasn't the best guard in the preseason. I think that the Vikings don't think he's there yet. So I really doubt it's Yankee. I mean, if it was, he probably would have been active on the game day roster instead of DeCass.
Makes sense. Now I've got another question for you about the offensive line. Mm-hmm. Why is Matt Khalil doing his best Sam Baker impression?
Holy crap! No one has any idea what happened, and it is clearly scaring the shit out of the Vikings too, because they have been in this enormous PR mode where all of the various outlets by which the Vikings want the opinions to come out of. Their official blogger, the people that they don't have on the payroll but functionally do, like affiliated radio stations, stuff like that, have all been, going full blast on, Matt Khalil wasn't bad, last week, which is the most objectively wrong thing you could say about that game. He was the worst. He was so bad. It's mind-numbing to me that one could watch that game and think that he was any good. And the biggest issue... I
think OC might get his first sack this week.
Yeah. It's possible. It's possible.
Man, he should retire if he doesn't. Unless Matt turns around, because it's not just the last game. It's not just the last 3 games. It's been this way since the beginning of the preseason. I mean, Junior Gillette put on a clinic against Khalil. He beat him outside, he beat him inside, he beat him with a bull rush, he beat him with a swim move. It's just everything. Something like 8-9 pressures. And Khalil sacked Teddy Bridgewater himself, sort of later in the game. It was, probably for an outsider, it was probably hilarious, actually. But man, he's so bad. And his rookie year was so good, right? He went to the Pro Bowl, and he probably wasn't a Pro Bowl quality tackle or whatever. But, he was good enough to deserve sort of the consideration, or at least, the thought process behind it, right? He went to the Pro Bowl as an alternate, which makes sense.
He's been outside of a couple of games last year.
Yeah, he had a couple of decent games last year. He actually had some pretty good games last year. I think on balance last year, people were pretty disappointed because overall the quality of his play was still subpar. But this year has just been abysmal, and no one knows why. The coaching staff has postulated that the reason is because he when he gets beat, he loses confidence, and those are compounding problems. I feel like that's probably too simplistic of an answer, but it is an answer, which is more than what anyone else has. I have no idea what happened. His technique is worse. I haven't really seen that often. His technique is objectively worse than it was as a rookie. In man protection, in area protection, in zone blocking. I mean, I think as a rookie he pulled as a tackle. I would not trust him the way that his feet are moving. I would not trust him to do that this year, and he hasn't, which is nice. But it even got to the point where they would give Matt Khalil not just extra help in terms of people, but schematically. The protection would slide left, and then you've also got a tight end in line, and then the halfback has to help Loadhold deal with Cameron Jordan, which leads to a sack. It's just it's a disaster.
Yeah, Falcons have been through this because Sam Baker was pretty decent as a rookie when he wasn't healthy, or when he was healthy, and then he was just like downright terrible like the next 3 seasons. And then he came back in 2012 and was decent, pretty good, above average, I guess. And then, he went back to being Sam Baker. So, I guess for Matt Khalil, if he follows the same career path, in 2 years he'll probably be decent again, and then he'll go back to being bad. So I guess you have that to look forward to.
That's fantastic news. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So he'll be good in like 2 more years. All right. Oh man. See, Matt Khalil, I never saw him falling off the table like that. I never saw that happen. He just, I don't know. Right now I'm thinking like, man, Atlanta should just make sure they have Jonathan Massaquoi and Malachi Goodman and Osi Umenyiora. Just attack Khalil all game long. Unlikely rundowns, put Goodman out there, and then on passing downs, make sure you have Massaquoi or Osi out there just to attack him. And Loadholt can't handle speed very well.
Yeah, it's interesting because Loadholt actually did a better job against speed rushers in the last 2 years than he has so far this year. It's not that he obviously he never really got faster. His footwork got a little bit better, but he just sort of figured out how to use his body a little bit better. This year he's not doing that, which I guess that's not like a huge surprise. He is who he is. The book's been out on Loadhold for a little bit. I mean, you attack him with speed rushers, and he struggles, and that's just sort of how he's been. The last 2 years he's been much better against speed rushers. These past 3 weeks he has not been.
Well, he might get a nice reprieve because he's playing Roy Bierman this week.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
That's nice.
Yeah. You put Mpong out there, then he'll actually struggle, but they won't put Mpong out there, so that's.
Or if they just put Massaquoi at left end.
Me and Scott been arguing about that the last couple of weeks. We're like, why are they not playing the good pass rushers like Massaquoi and Mpanga when they keep playing Osi and Bierman? But Osi actually looked decent last week, so I can't get too down on him this week.
I was okay with Osi last week, but I still think they got to play Massaquoi at left end if they're going to play Osi at right end, which is what they did in pass situations last week, and it worked.
Yeah.
On the play that our boy Kamal Ishmael got that interception for a touchdown, Osi was right end. Corey Peters was playing in the 3 technique. Massaquoi was left end, and then the nose tackle of all people was Tyson Jackson.
Really?
Yeah, and they doubled Tyson Jackson for some reason, which to me just screams, poor blocking scheme. Because they basically drove him 5 yards back off the ball, but everybody else came in and just destroyed. And Corey Peters hit the quarterback right as he threw the ball, and he was kind of floating away, which is why the ball was poorly thrown. And Kamal Ishmael just did what any good safety should have done, which was jump the route and run it back for a touchdown.
So, our big question this week, Teddy Bridgewater, first start. What are you expecting from him?
I mean, unadulterated joy. We've been. I mean, I've been high on Teddy for a while, and I was ecstatic when they grabbed him. I mean, anyone who followed me on Twitter they probably should have had to block me during the draft because I could not stop tweeting about how awesome it was.
My boy texted me 4 picks before that pick was made. We've already got the trade in place. We're going to get Teddy. And I was like, oh, nice.
Yeah.
I was like, so you've got to wait for him to fall there. He goes, oh, he's gonna fall there.
I guess it's nice to be buddy with the Seattle GM from time to time.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
You get Harvin, give us Teddy.
It worked out so well. Oh man, I'd make that trade again.
Especially for Cordero. Hell yeah.
Right. Oh, that was that's worked out
He's
pretty
just
well for
tall
the Vikings in
Harvin.
general. Yeah. In terms of Teddy, in terms of what to expect, people don't think of him as a downfield thrower. That was his weakness coming out of college, especially because his timing on those routes was spectacularly bad at times. I mean, it was abysmal. But when the Vikings have passed deep in the preseason, obviously you saw a little bit in this game. He's been really on point, which gives rise to sort of the explanations that some have given about sort of how is the nature of the offensive scheme that made it difficult for him to throw deep downfield. And those explanations were good, but you always want to sort of see that sort of thing happen. And in general, it has been good. I mean, the Vikings have had this really short passing game forever now, right? After Favre and 10, you had McNabb, who couldn't throw the ball anyway, and then you had Ponder and Castle, and Ponder's rookie year was probably the deepest downfield the Vikings ever got, because after that, the Vikings had the lowest depth of target for any team of like the past 5 years or something like that. And that's part of a function of having Harvin, but a lot of it's a function of Ponder. And then the next year, Ponder would throw it a little bit further downfield, but that's not to say he would throw it deep. Castle did a better job of it. This year, Castle's throwing pretty shallowly. And if you take a look at the All-22, you can see usually there's a receiver or two breaking deep. I mean, people sort of know my opinion on Greg Jennings. I mean, aside from that Darrelle Revis game, that dude is like always open. That dude is so good. And in this last game, he was getting open deep, and no one was throwing it to him until Teddy came in. And it looks like the Vikings might have a deep passing game, which is kind of unusual to say about bringing in Teddy Bridgewater, but that's one of the things I'd pay attention to. Obviously, the biggest difference is that the Vikings now have a quarterback who can respond to pressure appropriately, which is a refreshing change, especially given sort of how bad the offensive line has gotten. Because I thought the offensive line was underrated last year, nationally and locally. I'll still defend that based on their play on film, but I mean this year it's just been bad. And if you've got someone who can elude edge pressure like that, if you've got someone who can step up into the pocket, I'm not even going to talk about his mobility because it's not that important to me. Just his ability to sense and respond to pressure is fantastic. So the thing that's probably going to complicate things the most is not John Sullivan, who's an extremely good center in terms of your pass rushing. I think it's going to be Teddy in terms of the ability to get the ball out quick. I mean, he hits his hot routes. Castle. That was supposed to be the thing, right?
The thing that kind of frustrates me with Teddy is when I watch him on film, especially against the Saints, and especially watching him back-to-back against Breeze, you're like, damn it, we just saw Breeze, in the first week. Now we get to see him again. That Russell Wilson, that Breeze, the guy who stays behind the pocket and looks to throw.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The Matt Ryan of the first 3 games, who has somehow been mobile, which I think he learned from watching a lot of tape of Drew Brees.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Matt Ryan has been nothing short of stellar these last 3 games. My hope is that that's an anomaly and that he'll return to just being very, very good instead of being incredible.
It's not an anomaly. He finally has targets that are opening up the passing game and aren't forcing him to throw it to him. While he's standing there with 8 defenders on top of him like Tony Gonzalez used to.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say anything.
That's none of your business.
Dealing with the pass rush like he had to last year, getting hit 88 times like he did last year. This year he's been hit through 3 games 9 times.
Jesus.
Which is still on pace for, not 88, or 48 times. Yeah, he's been hit almost at a rate of about half.
That's incredible.
He's like, man, I'm sitting here dancing in the pocket. No one's messing with me. Would you believe he got sacked twice and hit twice in the last game with how he was throwing it?
I do not recall sacks, actually. That game was a massacre, so there's not a lot of negative things I recall about the Falcons. But, no, I don't recall any sacks. Who got him?
Dane Fletcher up the middle.
Yeah, and beat Devontae.
Going against Devontae Freeman, who made me feel like an idiot for touting his pass blocking because I saw a decent pass blocker in camp, and then I realized, oh, wait, it's against the Falcons. So...
Well, so the issue on that sack, was it so much identifying the rusher, or was it just literally just the actual act of blocking?
It was literally like he identified it, he got in the way, and he just got ran over.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, well, that's
he
nice.
He got steamrolled.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind every time we send Anthony Barr up the middle.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Well, no, but the guy who actually hit Matt Ryan was Dane Fletcher, who was being attacked by him. Joe Hawley was tied up by someone else, and that's the only reason why that even happened. Hawley was tied up by... Give me 1 second. I'm trying to find the film again. Hawley was tied up by Spence.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see, that's the point of having a Linval Joseph, to do the exact same thing. Hopefully.
By tied up, I mean, like, he was basically held, but...
Joseph can do that and get away with it, too. So it makes
That's true. Cool. Defensive tackles don't get called for holding, as we've seen from Justin Smith.
You're right. Oh, the tech stunt where, oh my god, where Justin Smith just pulls the inside of the pad away. There's nothing. Yeah. No,
just pulls both guys. Two has like a guard and a tackle just under their pads, grabbing their chest hairs and slapping them together. You're just like, holy crap, Justin Smith's a beast. And then you see Aldon Smith as a free rusher every time, and you're like, man, anybody would be considered the greatest speed rusher in the league if they had Justin Smith slapping around guards and tackles like a pair of cymbals.
Yeah, I think somebody looked at it last year. Aldon Smith's basically his sack plus minus with Justin Smith on the field was it was not favorable to Aldon Smith's unique individual capabilities. Justin Smith did a lot. It was pretty cool.
To be fair, I don't think Aldon Smith's that good.
He's good in the right way the Niners need him to be, which is that he's fast and that he dips.
I think you could see Aaron Lynch do the same things that Aldon Smith did. I think you could see Corey Lemonier do the same things. I think you could see Ahmad Brooks do the same kind of things. But I think the 49ers have a problem at the top.
Yeah, if it's such the case that that Aldon Smith is replaceable by people on the roster, you would actually expect them to have done that by now, given all of the everything. But I mean, who knows? I don't. You think there's like an actual when you say a problem at the top, do you think that there's that rift that everyone talks about, or do you think that there's just like an evaluate? Like, what do you mean by problem at the top?
I think Jim Harbaugh is not respected by his players. Unlike Mike Zimmer, I don't know about Mike Smith, but unlike Mike Zimmer, I don't think Jim Harbaugh is respected by his players. Now maybe Mike Smith, like, he just comes off as this dorky, like rah-rah kind of guy. Because whenever you watch Hard Knocks, whenever you see him do a press conference, you're like, when did Chris Farley's brother become the head coach of a football team?
So this is what gets me. So I think actually this is sort of one of the scandals that flew under the rug. How did they choose him to get mic'd up after seeing him in Hard Knocks? What producer made that decision? That person needs to be fired. I
am 100% in agreement there. Because Mike Smith boring is, yeah! He just scored a touchdown! Like,
oh, darn it!
Really? You know who you should mic up? Mike Tice. Because Mike Tyson would go like, fucking right, the offensive line did what it's supposed to do. Or Brian Cox, that deserves a cigar later. The first sack, or like when Corey Peters hits Josh McCown on the interception, that's why pass rush is important, everybody. Like, you could see Brian Cox saying that kind of shit.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would have been nice to see Brian Cox, especially because, I mean, there's the offhand chance that you could, hear about his, 15-year-old sexcapades again. I mean, whatever.
Rasheed, you just got to get it in the hole. I was told this when I was 15, just put it in the hole.
Wait, actually, as a Minnesota alum, I did want to ask about Rashid Hageman. What's the deal?
He's a project. Did everybody not realize this?
It's less that and more.
No, he's a project.
To me, it's the question is more. I never thought he seemed that soft. It's kind of weird, man.
Well, he's not really that soft. It's more he's overthinking what he's supposed to do. His technique isn't great, and it wasn't at Minnesota either.
No.
His technique's not great, and it's getting exposed by offensive linemen, and they're getting in his head, and he's getting pissed off, and he's playing with the anger. He's just playing poorly.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like he's not bad. He's still better than other Falcons defensive tackles of the past, like Kendall Moorhead, or I could go on with a bunch of random names of people that you have no idea. He's been better than Tyson Jackson.
Oh.
So, I mean, I can't really be too harsh on the guy. But
well, being better than Tyson Jackson isn't really saying much.
Yeah, that's true. It really isn't. He's been better than Croy Bierman playing left end the 3 snaps he played it, too. Man, Croy Bierman fell off the face of the earth. Let's put it this way. Would you rather have Parade Jerry, a negative 18.8 from Pro Football Focus last year, doesn't do it any justice for what he really was, or Rashid Hageman? Who can actually at least get in the way and pull some people around, and you see him developing. Like, you see him getting better from snap to snap. It's not like he's awful every single snap. He's raw, and he's learning. And there were some plays when they were putting him in the 1-tech, and he looked like the guy at Minnesota.
Yeah.
And there were some plays when they put him at the 3, and he looked awful. And he's not a defensive end in the NFL.
Right.
He did not play defensive end in the NFL.
That's that was his report coming out. Most people thought he was a 5-tech base defensive end. I don't know.
I saw a nose tackle. I still see a nose tackle.
People see his arm length and they think, this would be a pretty good, 3-4 defensive end.
I see a guy who could do what Justin Smith did on the inside of the line.
Yeah.
Give him some cheeseburgers. Let him be a 330-pounder. Let him be John Henderson, not Justin Smith. Let him be Marcus Stroud, not Justin Smith. Let him be...
It's Linval, actually.
Yeah, Linval Joseph. Let him be Paul Soliai. Let him do...
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's a better pass rusher than those guys.
Yeah. So I'm excited for him to do well. I'm cheering for him. In fact, I'm sort of low-key cheering for the Falcons in general. Obviously not next week, but they just got a lot of guys I like.
It's okay. When you've got a friend who works for the team, you kind of low-key cheer for the Vikings. I was like, I kind of hope the Vikings go 15-1 with the loss to the Falcons this year. Falcons go 16-0. I'd be perfectly happy with that situation.
Pretty good season, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I was also like, I kind of hope Matt Castle loses his job to Teddy Bridgewater. I didn't want him to lose it due to injury because you never wish that on anybody.
Mm.
But I think he's on. Did they put him on injury reserve?
Castle? Nah, he just broke a few bones in his foot. He'll be fine. Nah, they didn't put him on injured reserve.
Not yet.
Yeah. The reason I think the Vikings are waiting on putting anyone on IR or anything like that is I already talked about Fusco seeking a second opinion. Also, I would not be surprised if Rudolph, who has a sports hernia surgery, would be put on IR designated for return. Get him back to practicing within 6 weeks, which is exactly the timeline for that surgery. Get him back onto the field in 8 weeks. But if Fusco's, it depends on sort of what's happening with Fusco. But if that is similarly long term, they might rather do that with Fusco, for whatever set of reasons they might do that for. And with Castle, it depends on sort of the nature of the recovery schedule. He fractured a couple of things in his foot, and the most aggressive recovery schedule, he'd be ready within 4 weeks. Generally speaking, he'd probably be ready in 8. And so, if it's just a couple of like metatarsals or whatever, but I think they're just waiting on all of their IR decisions until they figure out what's going on with the rest of the team. So I mean, we'll see. They did just grab McLeod Bethel-Thompson, which means that they are probably not super confident that Castle will be ready at least in the short term for some period of time. Whatever you can do to keep Christian Ponder off the field.
Yeah, basically.
Christian Ponder was still on the team.
I don't know why he's on the team. I don't get it.
TJ Yates for him, but
yeah, one of them's one
probably be an upgrade for you.
Yeah, it probably would be. Well, so the biggest reason that would actually be an upgrade is because I've never seen any player, and I have seen Bryant McKinney play. I have never seen a player go in fuck it mode faster or embrace it more than Christian Ponder has. His play in camp and in the preseason, he gave negative shits. It was incredible. I've never seen a professional football player do that and get paid millions of dollars at the same time. Like, I've seen like those minimum salary camp bodies just like give up halfway through camp because they know they're not going to make the roster or whatever. Fine. But like I've watched Bryant McKinney play. I have watched there was a dude who quit the team. I think it was Jimmy Kennedy, who quit the team to pursue like a Masters of Fine Arts, which is like cool, but like he did not give up nearly as quickly as Christian Ponder did, or as holistically. It is stunning to see someone show up in camp and just be so much worse than their abysmal season last year and embrace it wholeheartedly.
Like, they're not gonna cut me.
He knew it.
That's what you're making it sound like. They're not gonna cut me. They don't care.
So he's on this roster. He doesn't care. Oh my
god, that sounds like Parade Jerry.
Right.
That's a good one. I like that.
Parade Jerry, like at minicamp, just you saw it. He was just like, man, I'm the 7th out of 7 defensive tackles. I see the writing on the wall. He's like, Cliff Matthews is getting more snaps than I am.
Oh, God.
And he just had this look on his face like, man, I'm done.
It's done.
There's no way these guys are bringing me back. So, like, halfway through training camp, he quits, and people are like, oh, my God. And I was like, yeah, I saw that coming. Dude,
well, actually, to me, the biggest surprise is not that he quit, but that he clearly quit with absolutely no plan in mind. Right, because that meeting, because what Mike Smith was like, so what's your plan? He was like, oh, I'll just do some things. I'm like, what? Your plan is I don't know.
One thing he did well, I'm not gonna lie here, is he invested his money to where he doesn't really have to do anything.
That's fantastic news.
So
I'm really happy for him.
Money, because he wasn't one of those guys that like spent a crap ton off the field.
I'm happy for him then. That's great.
He's kind of like, I hate to say it, he's from BFE, Mississippi, and he was like, oh, I got a house. I got this pile of money sitting in the bank. I don't know what to do with it.
All right. Yeah. I'm glad he had the wherewithal to retire without a plan. The fact that you have the resources to do that, that's pretty cool, man.
Well, I mean, if you look at his career earnings, he should have been able to retire without a plan. Yeah. Because he got paid so much to play so poorly.
And the Falcons kept paying him for some reason, even though he kept playing poorly. But it was like, hey, let's bring Parade Jerry back for year 4, year 5, year 6.
Jesus.
Yeah.
But let's put it this way: his rookie contract, he made $8.46 million.
Well, so the question is actually, why did he get a second contract? I mean, so his rookie contract is nice, but
Well, his second contract was veteran minimum.
oh, okay.
About $900K. He got a decent signing bonus with it.
It was veteran minimum, a $10,000 signing bonus, and then $160,000 of, hey, if you can make the roster every game, we'll give you $10K.
Yeah, okay. That's a fairly typical veteran minimum deal.
That's a fairly typical, like, hey, you were pretty shitty on your first contract,
Yeah.
so here, prove it on your second contract.
And
Period, if you ask me. But
He couldn't prove it at all.
it's interesting because all of the outside indications are that Ponder should have seen the writing on the wall. He must have gotten assurances inside the organization that he'd probably end up making the roster because, I mean, they didn't even pick up his option, which is outside of the top 10, so it's not one of those, franchise-killing, franchise-tag options. I mean, he was... he could have been set up to have about what you'd expect a veteran backup to make, I think, if I remember sort of the structure of his deal.
$3.2 million?
Yeah, a little bit more, but yeah.
So why has he been so god-awful, and why did you continue to pay him $10 million?
The Ponder?
Yeah.
Yes. You need bodies? I can't justify it. It's just like it's stuff. They didn't pick up his option, which is great news. He has been awful because he can be and still get paid. He put no work in this offseason. I mean, I don't know that, but it's pretty evident. In this offseason, and it was interesting because the Vikings were trying to sell this three-way quarterback competition, and Ponder wasn't. He was like not about that. He was like, yeah, they say it's a three-way competition. I'm not so sure about that. Sure. I'm just shocked. Like, obviously, if the Vikings cut him because it was a rookie deal for a relatively important pick, they would have had to eat his contract. That would not have been a big deal in terms of dead cap space, and you would have been able to get someone better on the roster, like another safety. Jesus.
Yeah, like a legitimate safety. I think their first round pick this year is going to be Landon Collins.
Yeah, that would be fantastic news.
And according to my my calculations, their first round pick should be somewhere in the top 10.
Yeah, well, right now it's like number 4 or something like that.
Yeah,
probably a little bit.
They're in a tie with Miami and Tennessee for the 4th through 6th pick.
Oh, okay.
So that's about where Landon Collins is going to go.
Yeah, that's I'm pretty sure Minnesota has the strength of schedule tiebreaker now, although they probably won't down the road, given just sort of the beginning of the schedule.
Well, these are based on the entire year, or the entire schedule that they'll play this year.
Okay.
I'm too lazy to figure it out week to week.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Why would you do that? Yeah. It serves no purpose anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, Landon Collins would be tight. There's sort of, some people are talking about drafting an offensive tackle. I'm not saying I'm against that. I'm just saying that's not going to happen. At least in the first round.
What about a running?
Bad though?
Hmm?
Would it be that bad?
I don't think it would be that bad. I don't think the organization is going to do that for whatever reason.
Well, say you take like Brandon Scherf or Cedric Aboyi, and you put them at left tackle, and then you put Khalil at right, and you move Loadholt to right guard, and boom, your line's a little bit better.
A lot of people have wanted to move Lodeholt to guard, and obviously that would hide basically all of his weaknesses and emphasize, his strengths, which is nice.
Plus, you could move Fusco to left guard and cut Charlie Johnson, so it's a win-win there.
Yeah, no, that would yeah, no, it's fantastic all around from that perspective. I don't think that's going to happen, especially because the Vikings really love Lodeholt at right tackle. They just love him there, and I can see why. He had two very good years at right tackle. This year, obviously, not up to that standard, but they love him there. They still strike me as one of those teams that has different prototypes for right tackle than left tackle, which is going the way of the dodo. But they're still one of those teams. It seems like, especially because the way they line up their offensive tackle depth at camp. There's one body type on the right and one body type on the left, and they're distinct from each other in pretty significant ways. So my guess is that it's not going to happen unless Norv Turner exercises a different level of control. And Jeff Davidson's not going to come back after the year, so they'll have a different OL coach, so that'll probably mean different things too.
What about a running back?
He didn't seem too happy that he was forced to come back. I've got a friend who coached up there as the offensive assistant one year, and he was basically working under Jeff. And he was like, man, Davidson did not want to go back to Minnesota this year. It's nothing against Zimmer or,
No, I have heard separately from people who would definitely know. And he was livid. It's not that he was livid. Because it's not that he was against the coaching staff, it's that he was left at limbo because he didn't know if he was going to have a job after they were looking for, because they kept all of the assistants on retainer, they didn't let them go, and then they let whoever the new coach was going to be decide what to do with them. And that meant that they couldn't pursue other jobs, and they didn't know if they were going to be guaranteed this Minnesota job.
The fact that Norv Turner took over, because Ron Turner liked him, even though they were equals, basically, one was quarterback coach, one was offensive line coach, when you got your brother basically vouching for you, it doesn't hurt.
No, yeah, absolutely. But at the time, he didn't know that Turner was going to be the offensive coordinator. At the time he got the offer from, it wasn't just the Falcons that actually talked to him. There were like 4 other teams too. I know the Patriots would have liked to have him. They talked to him because I think that Skarnecki just left. And then there were a couple of teams, mostly AFC teams, but a couple of other teams that talked to him that wanted him, and the Vikings said no to all of them without having hired a coach, meaning that he didn't know if the person they were going to hire was going to vouch for him. Luckily, they got someone who absolutely did, but he's not going to come back because it's the end of his contract this year, and so he's not going to sign a new one. They've offered him new contracts, and he said
it wouldn't shock me to see him go to Atlanta, even if they keep, say Mike Tice stay, Mike Smith, all these guys stay. It wouldn't shock me to see him to go to Atlanta in some type of offensive assistant capacity.
He seemed to really want to go to Atlanta, based on the conversations that I had.
He's good friends with Dirk Cotter. He likes Mike Tice. He's got a lot of ties to the area. So it would not shock me at all to see him come to Atlanta. Everybody loves Terry Robisky. He's the Brian Cox of wide receiver coaches. So, everybody absolutely loves him. It's just and Davidson would be welcome here with open arms. He'd probably be given Wade Harmon's role, and they'd find something else for Harmon, because he's the assistant offensive line coach, but they like Jeff Davidson. There's also rumor that the Falcons are going to be losing Scelfo this year.
Oh, yeah?
Because there's a couple college programs that want to bring him on as an offensive coordinator. Which, if you're a college program, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, Fair enough.
I'd bring in a guy who's worked under Mike Mularkey and, you know, Dirk Cotter as an offensive coordinator for a college program and wants to put in a pro-style scheme after not having one for years. Like, I don't know, Georgia Tech. So
That would be interesting to see Georgia Tech implement a new offensive scheme. I would watch that.
I think he's going to end up getting offered the head coaching job there.
Oh yeah.
It wouldn't shock me. That's all I'm going to say.
What are Tech fans' thoughts on Johnson, on Paul Johnson?
He should be fired.
That's the general consensus.
Yeah, he started well this year, but the general consensus is unless he wins a national title, he should be fired. Like, you know how you have a coach who's on his last leg and, like, this is what you got to do to win. This is what you got to do in order to keep your job. They basically were like, minimum ACC championship, national title, national playoff at least, you keep your job.
Yeah, well, he's gone.
Well, Georgia Tech's schedule like progressively gets harder as it goes because they get Wofford and Tulane and Georgia Southern, which was a close game, and Virginia Tech. Miami's going to destroy them. Duke's probably going to beat them. North Carolina's probably going to beat them. Pittsburgh's probably going to destroy them because they have no run defense. Virginia's probably going to beat them. Like, they're probably going to go 4-8 looking at the schedule. They're 4-0 right now. They're probably going to go 4-8.
Yeah, well, I guess it's down then.
They're that bad. I think Paul Johnson might not make it through October 25th. I'll put it that way.
Wow. I've always liked watching Georgia Tech. If not, obviously not because they're necessarily good, just because I don't watch that much college football. So when I do, I like to watch something that is like clearly not NFL football. And Georgia Tech is clearly not NFL football.
No, it's closer to high school football.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. When things work, it's super exciting. It don't work often, but
They really don't, and I think Pittsburgh's going to be the best test for that defense because their running game is nasty. They've got what's his name, the Terminator, James Conner.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of his, man. He's I know Aaron went to Pitt for context here.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of Conner. I think he does a good job.
He's a beast.
He's got great vision.
Yeah, he's gonna be good. He's gonna be a good one.
Oh, and then actually, speaking of running backs, Aaron, you asked twice actually if the Vikings were going to potentially draft a running back. I don't know that it would be a first-round consideration for them. Obviously, their last first-round running back turned out pretty well, even with all of these things. But I think first that the Vikings are high on McKinnon as a complementary option. I don't think that they envision McKinnon as a replacement for Peterson in the long term. Although, who knows? But I do think they would like to invest in a running back that would provide them with sort of a change of pace or a 1-2 punch or a complementary style running back. And for that, you don't invest a first-round pick. That's just your feature guy then. I think they're probably going to try and invest. They're definitely going to draft a running back, at least in my mind. But I think it's going to be after the second round. But, I can't. I don't speak with any knowledge of the situation. But I think that's what's going to happen.
So is Peterson done in Minnesota?
I think so. So the question is whether or not it's dependent on the conviction, like whether or not he's convicted. But the NFL policy is not contingent upon that, and if they suspend him for 6 to 8 games without a conviction, which has happened in the past, then I don't see them, because he's not going to be back by the time. We get to the end of the season, so I don't see them, keeping ties to them, even as he's trying to accelerate his trial schedule. That said, based on my reading of the law, not a lawyer, obviously, I don't think Peterson particularly stands a chance in trial. But I have no idea. But uh, you take a look at sort of what the guidelines are for what it takes to be injurious to a child, whether it's through neglect or recklessness or not, and it seems like Peterson well exceeded those guidelines by a very significant margin, based on my reading of the relevant statutes. But I don't think it's particularly close. So I don't think that he ends up getting found innocent. I think uh, it's weird because the lawyer Rusty Hardin has said something along the lines of, for right now they're not pursuing a plea deal, which I think is ridiculous. I think that they should pursue a plea deal to keep him out of prison, because it's a possibility. I mean, it's a state jail felony. It's not a felony 1 or 2 or 3, but it's still, there's the possibility, the maximum sentence of 2 years. There is a minimum sentence that does not include jail time, but if I were them, I would plea, not only to end it early, but also to keep him out of jail. And a plea, obviously, is a guilty conviction, and therefore would end up incurring triggering the NFL policy, which Goodell said is actually, so he clarified that it's not going to be the domestic violence policy, but rather the personal conduct policy, which makes sense because the way the domestic violence policy is written, it's very narrow. It's just about spousal assault, and regardless, I think it's still going to be at least 6, probably 8 games, if he pleads for guilty. In that case, there's no reason to keep him on the roster. I think he's done.
Okay. End of an era.
End of a very long era.
Oh God, yeah. It's difficult to think about, not because it's like emotionally impossible or anything, although obviously there's a lot of emotions involved, but it's literally just difficult to think of a Vikings team that isn't extraordinarily good at running the ball. I mean, I guess, the Falcons kind of went through this for a little bit, right? Where they were a run-first team for a long time. They were run-first when they first had Matt Ryan, and then they just transitioned away from it. But for the Vikings, it's just it's not so much that they were a run-first team or that their offensive identity was running the ball. It's that literally everything was kind of just wrapped up in enabling Peterson specifically. So, I mean, schematically and from a roster perspective, it's really difficult to think about. It's going to be difficult if you're thinking forward about the Vikings without having this extraordinary running game, because they've had a good one for so long. And then, sort of emotionally, there's like sort of a lot of things involved. I mean, yeah, you probably shouldn't have heroes, but that doesn't mean you don't become emotionally attached to players. And Peterson was a super awesome guy. I mean, and from everything we see about this case, he clearly didn't seem to have any malicious intent or anything like that. So it's not even like he necessarily is a bad person so much as someone who really didn't know sort of what appropriate limits were. But I mean, everyone loved him for his off-field stuff, his on-field stuff. It's an end of era. It's really difficult to sort of deal with.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that everybody rooted for, not just because he was on everybody's fantasy team or people wanted him to be on their fantasy team, but he was generally, pretty much universally liked, I think, by pretty much any fan of football in general. So it's odd to see him kind of have it end in such, I guess, dire circumstances. And, it's one of those things, I guess, for the Vikings, they knew it was on the horizon, but probably going into this year, you probably thought it would be another 1 or 2 more years before you have to start thinking about who's the guy that's going to replace Peterson. And now it seems like that's on the table right now.
Yeah, it definitely accelerated the schedule. So I think for in general, when you get a running back up to that age, you start to plan as if it's 2 years out or 1 year out. I think for a lot of Vikings fans, there's pretty decent reason, despite his injury history, to think that he would last longer than I think a typical running back. First, because sort of his dominance was a result of both his technical skill and his physical ability, but he would continue to be an extremely effective running back as he aged, because he's not reliant on it, even though, I mean, he loves to be violent, which is probably something that he'd want to cut down on if he was going to continue his career into the 30s. But he's definitely someone that you thought would last longer for a lot of reasons. And also, I mean, he was physically impossible to conceive of. After he comes back from that ACL, it's not just that he had the crazy 2012 season or anything like that. He obviously did, but when you hear about the comments from the surgeon, Dr. James Andrews, talking about sort of the physical fitness of Adrian Peterson, I don't know if you heard this quote, but when they opened up his knee, James Andrews said that the wear and tear on his cartilage was like a baby's. He had no wear and tear on his cartilage, on many of his tendons. And so there's a lot of good reasons to believe he would have lasted even longer than the 1 or 2 years. So to think of replacing him immediately, that's not where we were a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you guys are getting rid of him, he'll get the suspension and someone's going to pick him up because, as you say, Peterson's probably going to play. He'll be like Emmitt Smith. He'll probably play until he's like 36 or something like that, until literally the wheels fall off. And so he'll probably play another 5-6 years in the league somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. Worst comes to worst, he'll try to be Thomas Jones at the end of his career, right? So.
Yeah.
Which was still pretty decent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, sounds like it's mailbag time.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Some of these, Arif, you can jump in on because a lot of them have to do with the Vikings. First one from David V. Kano kind of answered what's going on with Matt Khalil, but we'll jump to Dave Kent's question. He says, is the Vikings O-line really as bad as it looked versus the Saints? Khalil looks garbage.
Well, there's a good chance Khalil will continue to look garbage. The rest of the offensive line has performed better than they did in that Saints game. John Sullivan, I'm going to stick by him. I thought he was the best player on that offensive line. I thought he did a decent job against the Saints. I think he's done a pretty good job overall. Charlie Johnson, I think, is hit or miss. I think so. The problem with Charlie Johnson is that when the Vikings' offensive line was elite, he was below average as a guard. And so the perception from fans is that he was abysmal, which is not true. He was just not very good. But for him, I think
pretty bad.
He's
Let's call it what it is. He was pretty bad.
He was above a replacement level starting guard, which is both an indictment of the guard depth in this league and an indication of why the Vikings probably didn't want to replace him. Look, I wanted to replace him too. My point is just that Johnson can put together an average game a lot of times. Not most of the time, which is why he's not good. But, so I would say Johnson is still probably the weak link on the line. If he's not, it's Matt Khalil. Either way, you attack the left side of that line. That side of the line is garbage. I think Sullivan's fine. If Fusco was in there, he'd be great. He's not, so that's a huge problem. Lodeholt, he's not going to continue to be as bad as he was in that Saints game. In fact, in his previous games, he was better. So he's a very good right tackle. He's an elite right tackle when he's on. He's embarrassing when he's off, but he's been a lot less off than he's been on in the past couple of years. So I would say that the line isn't necessarily as bad as it looked, but there's enough bad signs out there that I'd worry.
Okay. Well, yeah, Johnson's going to be playing Babino this week, so good luck with that.
Yeah, that's not going to turn out well. Yeah, that's...
All right, Scott, I think you can answer this one. Dave Kent has a second question. What do the Falcons need to change their poor record on the road? Run the ball more?
Yeah, run the ball more. Make sure that our good friend Jake Matthews is healthy. Because if he's healthy, I think they're going to be a lot better because they could actually stop a pass rush. Other than that, they should be fine. At least against the Vikings this week, they should be a little bit better because it's a good matchup for the team. Basically, don't play the Bengals. That's what they need to do on the road this year, and they should be okay. I think the Bengals proved this past week that they're probably a Super Bowl contender.
I think so.
Andy Dalton. No, I won't go that far.
I mean, if you want to take a look at the first 3 weeks, Andy Dalton hasn't been bad.
Yeah, well, regular season Andy Dalton's pretty good. It happens when we get to the January and you actually win a game.
Well, I don't know how much a Falcons fan should be talking that much about the difference between regular season and postseason performances.
Well, Matt Ryan, okay, Matt Ryan's pretty good, except the problem is his defense gives up like 37 points in every playoff game. Degree of difficulty is a little harder. That's all.
I understand.
Yeah.
You do have to include degree of difficulty there because it's not like Andy Dalton's got a bad defense he's working with.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Andy Dalton lost to, the T.J. Yates Texans, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit different.
Yeah, Andy Dalton, if he can get to 17 points, they should be able to win a playoff game. He can't get to 17 points. That's the problem.
He's got a point there.
All right, we got another one from Andrew Scheiwaller. How do you two compare this year's Falcons to last year's Broncos offense? It's early, but the Falcons are first in scoring, total yards, and passing.
Oof. They're not the same team on the ground. Although they can run and they can run at a decent clip, they're not anywhere close to the same team on the ground. Through the air, they're a fun team to watch, but they don't have that tight end that's Julius Thomas. I'd love to see Levine Toilolo turn it on the last 13 games of the year and give us 1,000 yards and look like Julius Thomas, but I don't see that happening.
If Toilolo can hold on to the ball, what's his upside?
Have you seen Jason Witten in Dallas?
All right.
I think that's probably the best comparison for the kind of player he really is, which is like a complete tight end. But he's not going to be the best in the league, and he's the Roddy White of tight ends, is what Jason Witten is.
Sure.
He's never been the best in the league. He'll never be the best in the league, but he's always going to be in that top 5 to 10 conversation. He's going to be a great contributor. By the time his career ends, people are going to go, man, that guy probably should be a Hall of Famer because of certain things he's done throughout his career.
Right.
But he's not. That's Levine Toilolo, like, best case.
Right. No,
everything clicks. Everything's perfect. His realistic best case is probably Algie Crumpler, 3-4 years of good, and then just nothing after.
Yeah, that's not bad.
I'm just hoping for Mercedes Lewis.
That's probably what he will be.
2010 Mercedes Lewis, not the...
everything.
Mercedes Lewis is probably what he's going to be.
Yeah.
Not that I want him to be. Again, like I say all the time, if I'm talking crap about a player, I want them to prove me wrong. Because if they prove me wrong, it's probably going to be a good thing for the Falcons. And then I have no issue admitting that I was wrong, like I was about Stanley Maponga. I was wrong about that guy. I'm absolutely happy to be wrong about that guy. He's shown that he's at least a decent pass rusher. Still got to work on some run defense, but that's easy to do if you can at least, you know what they say, nail down one aspect of your game. Make sure that's good, and then work on the others. You can improve as long as you've got something to hang your hat on.
Yeah. Yeah, Maponga did a good job bending the edge last week, get that sack. Something that Croy Bierman can't do, but oh well.
Exactly. He's already giving us what Croy can't.
All right, Arif. The Walker man asked, thoughts on the Vikings D, in particular, what I thought was a good performance against the Saints in New Orleans.
Yeah, so there's been a couple of times that the Vikings defense performance has significantly outpaced the amount of points they've given up as a result of special teams failures, as a result of offensive failures, etc. A lot of short fields. that the defenses had to deal with it. I think sort of on a per play basis, the defense is generally good. I wouldn't say the performance against the Saints was good, but yeah, I wouldn't say it was bad either, given sort of everything that they had to deal with. Obviously, those first two drives were abysmal, but after that, they sort of turned things around. Um, Generally speaking, I think that the defense is significantly better than it was last year, which is all people were asking for, because it was probably a bottom three defense last year. I mean, it wasn't Dallas and it wasn't Chicago, but it was bad. So I think the defense is already better. I think that no matter what happens, it'd be difficult to conceive of this defense as being anything but at least league average. In which case, fantastic work by Mike Zimmer. I mean, the defense has like 7 new starters on it this year. So you're going to have a lot of troubles. The defense is pretty young anyway. And there's a lot of good flashes. And Harrison Smith, I mean, holy crap, he's playing out of his mind. He continues this level of play, and even if he doesn't, there's a conversation for it. If he continues this level of play, he's a Pro Bowl safety.
Well, the thing that I thought was interesting about that Saints game was you guys did something that the Falcons have never done against the Saints, which is keep Jimmy Graham in check and hold them to only 20 points on offense. And they really, until that body slam by Captain Munnerlyn, pretty much had locked up the Saints offense, and that kind of changed the game, and they ended up scoring. But up to that point, it was conceivable that the Vikings could have held them to under 14 points.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because if you take the first 2 drives away, and I'm not saying it's fair to do that, but you take those first 2 drives away, and you've got a film of just this really effective defense, at least for sort of what the Saints were doing. It seems like they got a pretty good idea of what affects what quarterbacks and how to attack them, which makes sense. That was sort of Mike Zimmer's forte in Cincinnati. And finding different ways to attack different quarterbacks in ways that are specifically exploiting those weaknesses. Both Breeze and Brady are worse than other quarterbacks of high caliber at inside pressure. And so the Vikings were trying to find ways to create that inside pressure without, sacrificing some of that coverage later on. And they couldn't do that against the Patriots, which is why they ended up going to some more dangerous blitzes. But against the Saints, they were able to do that. Partially because Goodwin, was out, and partially because there's some better design. I think the best thing about that defense were the adjustments that they made. I thought one of the reasons they did a good job with Jimmy Graham is because they sort of figured out how he wins and what he does to win and what he does to enable other people to win, and they didn't try to take him completely out of the game, because I think when you try to take him completely out of the game, you're either enabling everyone else and then you overcorrect for that, or it's sort of a high risk, high reward. If he breaks free of that coverage, he's got acres of space because he's such a good yak threat. And so those are the things that they were able to take care of.
You think they'll do the same against Julio this week?
No, I think Julio's more fluid and a little bit better in terms of the way that he wins. I mean, obviously he's a very strong receiver and he's a very fast receiver, so he shares that with Graham, and he wins with physicality if he wants. But that's not to say he's like not a route runner, right? I mean Graham at times, his flexibility, you'd wonder how he could be so good, but even though he's so stiff, but I mean he's just so physically dominant. Julio has the fluidity and flexibility to demand a different kind of attention. I don't think they'll shut Julio down, even though I like Xavier Rhodes a lot, and even though Josh Robinson has been playing out of his mind this year, just because it's a different beast. It's harder to take care of. You can scheme around a tight end. I don't know if you can scheme around a receiver as easily.
It's tough to scheme against a guy like Julio Jones.
Yeah.
when you've got, I mean, I hate to say it, but St. Louis doesn't have a guy like Julio. New England doesn't have a guy like Julio. New Orleans does not have a guy like Julio.
Not like
I
Julio.
like Brandon Cooks, but he's not Julio Jones.
Yeah. No, they're different brands.
They've got a guy like Roddy and Marcus Colston. I think those guys are similar at this point in their career. They've got a guy similar to Hester and Cooks. Harry Douglas is generic receiver who somehow makes plays on third down for 10 yards. Like,
just appears when
and
called.
then drops the clutch catch in the NFC Championship game because he trips. And if he doesn't trip, it's probably a touchdown. And we don't have that
tripping that Harry Douglas is ridiculous.
Friggin' Julio. If it wasn't Harry Douglas there and it was Julio Jones or even Devin Hester there, I bet you Devin Hester makes that catch, and there's not even a question. He's gone.
I mean, in fairness, y'all have seen a different Devin Hester than I have over his career.
We've seen the Devin Hester that actually looks like the offensive coordinator said, go out there and earn your job at wide receiver, and we'll figure out a way to work you in at wide receiver. Not an offensive coordinator who says, let's scheme a special package for you at what you think you're good at doing. It was, no, you've got to earn your spot.
No, yeah, they're definitely using him better than any of the Chicago offensive coordinators did, be it March or Tice or whoever. I don't know. It's just like weird to me that he's doing well as a receiver, after having seen him play in Chicago. It's just
Matt Ryan is also probably the only quarterback that's gotten along with him too.
Oh, that's actually a pretty big deal.
Because Jay Cutler and Hester did not get along at all.
No, that was a significant problem they had.
When Roddy basically pulled Hester to the side early, like right after they signed, he was like, "You're gonna love playing with Matt Ryan, because this guy knows the game and this guy gets it to everybody." That's basically what he told him. He's like, "You're gonna get your touches. You're gonna be on the field. You just got to earn your spot on the roster, and you'll get some time." So Hester's been happier in Atlanta too. He's closer to home. He's from the Miami area, so he's a lot closer to home than he was in Chicago.
Yeah.
And people from Miami do not like the cold.
Yeah, that is true.
If you have not noticed that.
Brian McKinney was not a huge fan of the cold.
Snow, not a good thing.
It is still pretty fun to watch players deal with snow for the first time. Not on the field, that sucks. But just like sort of in their everyday lives and on Twitter. Seeing players deal with snow for literally the first time in their lives is fantastic. Obviously not a huge selling point for Minnesota.
Yeah.
In terms of dealing with Julio, I just think that the Vikings, schematically, Zimmer hasn't done very much in terms of rolling safeties on top. Maybe he does that. It's probably
he has to do that. Like if he
probably the best way to do that.
If he's like Xavier Rhodes might be able to do some things against Julio just because he's long, and Julio has some troubles with Aqib Talib, who's basically built the same way.
Yeah.
Last year, but
They play the same way too.
Yeah, but the thing that Belichick did with Talib was he basically said, "Jam him, and we'll give you safety help, so that you don't have to worry about if he beats you, then you'll have some help over the top." And if Zimmer doesn't do that for Xavier Rhodes, then he's going to be screwed.
Yeah. So hopefully, it doesn't happen a lot, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So hopefully we'll see it. I have so much faith in Harrison Smith now. I'm probably going to get burned by it. But
Harrison Smith is a good safety, but I don't know if he matches up well unless he's basically running a half, like a cover half or a cover third. I don't see him as that guy who can cover Julio Jones one-on-one in a minute.
No, I don't think. I think
as an umbrella, I could see it working.
That's basically what I mean. I wouldn't want Harrison Smith one-on-one against Julio if they break into his zone or anything like that. But as an umbrella, I think he'd be pretty good.
Okay, we got one last mailbag question. Justin Davis asks, "What is the max number of games we win this season? 9, 10, 11? What do you think, Scott?
Mathematically, 15.
Realistically,
I'd say 12, 13. It wouldn't shock me to see the Falcons have a really good season this year. Sometimes you need that confidence-boosting game early in the season. And destroying a division rival, being 2-0 in the division, it's a big confidence booster really early. You know, that win against the Saints to start out. In 2010, Atlanta destroyed the Arizona Cardinals 41-7 second week of the season, and then went into New Orleans and beat them close. In 2012, they destroyed Kansas City the first week, beat Denver in a close game, and then beat San Diego close, you know, to go up 3-0. Sometimes you got to get that quick early momentum in the season, and it builds confidence throughout. The Falcons are probably riding high right now, like, hey, we just destroyed Tampa Bay. We got New Orleans. You know, we match up well with Minnesota. We should be able to pull out a W there. We match up well with New York. We should be able to pull out a W there. Chicago's coming into our house. No one wins here in Atlanta but us. You know, Baltimore, that might be a loss. Going to Detroit might be a loss. But then it's back to Tampa Bay. And, again, you want a confidence boost coming off a bye week, you go into Tampa Bay. And, hell, it might look just like the first game.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting because I think that number, I'm sitting at about 11, I think, right now still, just because I'm not sold on what the Falcons are on the road. They got this road stand coming up where they play 6 out of their next 7 not in the Georgia Dome. And as Scott said, they're great in the Georgia Dome. I think it's probably realistic that they'll probably go 7-1 this year at home. They'll probably slip up against somebody. I don't know who, but, you know,
I'm thinking Detroit at Wembley is the game that they slip up.
That's, you know, because it's pretty much a road game. Yeah. So to me, it's going to be an issue. Can they go 5-3 on the road? I don't know. Historically, they tend to go about 500 on the road. So 4-4, 7-1 at home. You know, about 11 wins. So I think that's probably what we're looking at. But you know, they could end up going, you know, 4-2 or 5-3 over this next 5 and whatever the math is. I can't do it.
The 4 games that really scare me on the road are at New Orleans, at Green Bay in December. Because, again, warm weather team in the snow, bunch of Southerners in the snow. Does not work. They don't like it very much.
Yeah, dome team.
Carolina, at Carolina. That might not be as bad as I think it is, but I don't trust Atlanta in Carolina with Cam Newton healthy, and he should be fully healthy by then. And then at Baltimore, the only reason why that one kind of scares me is because you never know what kind of Baltimore team you're going to get. You might get a team that's got a good defense that day, and they've got the tools to have a great defense. So that'd be the only real question I have there.
That's fair. I think, I mean, from what I see, obviously I haven't been following the team as closely as either of you. I feel like their ceiling is 13 wins. I don't know. I guess I just don't see this Atlanta team as being significantly worse than the other 2 Atlanta teams that had 13 wins. When things are gelling together. Obviously, there's no guarantee that those things will gel together for a while. I think 11 wins is a pretty reasonable estimate, but if we're talking about max, I think realistically the max is 13.
Okay. Well,
although I have a feeling Detroit's kind of counting that game in Wembley Stadium as a loss too.
I think they are. At least. Who knows?
I feel like any team should just look at that game as a loss because you're like, yeah, we got to fly to England.
Work around it, yeah.
We're going to play at 9 in the morning like it's Little League football. Like we're playing Pee Wee again. Like, that's honestly the last time these guys played at 9:30 in the morning.
And they don't have any Waffle Houses up there.
What?
And they don't have any Waffle Houses up there.
No, they don't. And that's not going to be... To be fair, they don't really have any Waffle Houses above the Mason-Dixon. At least comparatively.
Have you looked into this? Do you think this might be relevant in terms of their home road record? Maybe that's the reason.
Aaron, we might have to look into that because they do tend to play pretty decent in Florida and Carolina and Tennessee. Even against the Saints and in Texas, they do okay. Yeah. But you take away the Waffle House, you take away the talent. I mean,
It's pretty solid theory.
Riff might have a very good point right there. They might even do well in Ohio. There's 64 Waffle Houses there.
Really?
Yeah, there's 64 Waffle. I pulled up a map, but there's no Waffle House capital like Georgia.
I mean, right.
381 in this state. We literally have a Waffle House down the street from a Waffle House.
So you're saying that Waffle Houses are the Starbucks of Georgia?
I'm saying that there's probably more Waffle Houses than Starbucks in Georgia.
Yeah, I would say there's a good bet there's a Waffle House across the street from a Waffle House.
I mean, like, on one street, it's called Cobb Parkway. You just drive down from Kennesaw all the way through to Marietta. You can count about a dozen in about an 8-mile stretch.
Wow, I gotta get down to Georgia. I love Waffle House.
It's great. But when you get to Georgia, you see some things in Waffle House you don't want to see.
I don't know, man. I've been to some pretty bad Waffle Houses.
Are there good Waffle Houses?
Right.
mean,
if there are, they're not in North Carolina. Been to
The
those.
best Waffle House I've been to was on right at Isle of Palms in Charleston.
So okay, so what is a best Waffle House? What does that look like? So this is the pinnacle of Waffle House. What does that
It
look
was clean. It was just built like 3 days before I went there.
like? Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
The staff was like new and excited and all smiling and like
They weren't,
mainly
like,
cute college girls
Dead
from
and
the
sarcastic.
beach.
Okay. Wow.
And then you could like see the beach from it because it was beachfront property somehow.
What?
And then like 3 weeks later, it was a Waffle House again.
They just hired a bunch of sassy
I
black
mean, I
ladies.
hate to say it that way, but 3 weeks later, it was a Waffle House again. It was like, oh, we're having a new Waffle House. Let's make it look pretty. And then it was like, oh, we're Waffle House. Wow, why'd we try so hard?
Yep. On that note, I think that's a good way to end the show, Scott. Arif, how can people find you? I know you're on Twitter. I know you write for like a billion sites. Where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, I should have taken the time to like make a little chyron so people could see it. But you can find me at Arif Hasan NFL. I'll spell that because my name is weird. ARIF HASAN NFL. And that's honestly the best way to keep up with my work because I'll publish in a couple of different places. But the two primary places to look are VikingsTerritory.com and VikingsJournal.com.
What, you don't write for Daily Norseman anymore?
I do on my podcast, The Daily Norseman, so you should check it out there. But I haven't written there in a while. I mean, not that I won't, but it's just like a lot of stuff happens, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, people can find us on Twitter. I'm at FalcFans. Scott's at Scott Karasik. Check out Scott's stuff on Bleacher Report. I'm at FalcFans.com. Please hit up the show at Falcons PFC on Twitter. Ask your mailbag questions. Next week we'll be talking about the Falcons' win over the Vikings and previewing their upcoming matchup against the New York Football Giants. We'll answer your mailbag questions, and that's our show.